Okay guys, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you some neat tips and tricks and cool things that happen with transversals. So I'm going to start doing that by picking a color. You guys have color pencils. I want you to pick one of those colors. My color is going to be orange. And what I'm going to do with orange is I'm going to shade all of the acute angles in my diagram. Acute angles are no wider than 90, they're less than 90. So I'm going to start with angle 2 that is less than 90. It is not a wide angle. And I'm going to shade angle 2. Shade on the inside here too. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shade all of the angles that look like angle 2. They're acute. So also angle 3 is not a wide angle, so I'm going to shade that one too. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to shade angle 6. And it looks like angle 7 is also acute. I shaded all of my acute angles. Then if you take a step back and you look at those angles that you just shaded, they look to all be the same size. Meaning not only are they acute, but they are congruent. They would actually have the same exact measure. Congruent. They're equal. So if I were to put a measure in those angles, like let's say angle 2 was 30, the cool thing that happens here is that all of the angles would then be 30. If you have one, you have them all. So if angle 2 was 30, that means angle 3 would also be 30, angle 6, and angle 7. They're all 30. So the trick here goes in this box is that if angles are acute, then they are all congruent. I'm going to erase the board. You guys can pause here if you need to get the notes before I erase it. Okay, moving on to trick 2. For trick number 2, I'm going to switch colors now. I'll switch colors to green. You switch to your other color also. And this one says shade all obtuse angles in your different color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to the top. So let me scroll back up to the top. Okay, scrolled back up to the top and I grabbed my diagram from up there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shade all of my obtuse angles in a different color. So I've got angle 1, that's going to be green. I'm going to shade angle 4 in green. Notice how these angles are much wider than the other ones. I'm going to shade angle 8 in green, and I'm going to shade angle 5 in green. And this question says, if all acute angles were 30, how can we find the measure of the other angles? So if this angle was 30, how can we find the measure of my green angles, which is x? Well, since this diagram is full of straight lines, and I know that a straight line equals 180, all you'd have to do is take 180 and subtract the 30 that you have here. So it would be 180 minus 30, which leaves you with 150 degrees. Which, if this is 150 degrees, then that means all of them are 150 degrees. So the answer here is subtract from 180. In the example, it says if measure of angle 2 is 30, then the measure of angles 1, 4, 5, and 6, and 8, are 150 because they are supplementary to 30. that means you subtract from 180. So the trick here is that if the angles, like angles 1 and 2, are not actually congruent, if the angles don't look congruent, then they're supplementary. So you have two types of angles. You either have angles that are congruent to each other, or you have angles that are supplementary to each other.